So lesson 4 in professional writing skills focuses again on clear language. So we talked earlier about inviting openings and the importance of using clear, easy to engage with language at the beginning of your message. And now we're going to dive deeper into other language strategies to help your reader grasp easily what your concepts are. So the first one is to use active language. And we have this, this image of somebody running quickly across this slide. Do you know what the difference is, or the opposite of active language is? The opposite of active is passive language. So we like to say that passive language is dull and it doesn't bring your writing to life, whereas active language, and it's a specific writing technique, which I will show you, but active language brings your writing to life. Now, we talked earlier about using every strategy, every tool in your toolkit to get your message across clearly in the fewest number of words. And active language is part of the collection of tools that you will use to do that. Now, there are some organizations that use more passive language than others, and there are some organizational cultures that do go back to passive language frequently. So if your organizational culture uses passive language, that's okay, but you should know the difference between active and passive language and use it knowingly. So let's decode that. What does that mean? So in active language, you have an actor that's defined and the actor comes first. In passive language, there is either no actor or the actor comes after the action. So here's an example. The project was managed by John. Now, John is the actor, but he comes after the action. So instead, we're going to turn that into active language. John managed the project. Okay? So again, we're thinking, let's look at some more examples so we can see what the big deal is about passive and active language. So here in passive language, a safety plan was prepared and distributed to the employees by the committee. All right, again, in this case, the actor is defined, but the actor comes after the action. So instead, to turn that into active language, we say, the committee prepared a safety plan and distributed it to employees. Now, do you see the life in the active language and kind of the delayed gratification in the passive language section? This is where it's really important. If you are giving instructions to somebody, it's really important to try to use active language. So in passive language, the water should be measured every 35 minutes. Now, if you told me that was the regulation or the imperative, the water should be measured every 35 minutes, I might be thinking, well, I agree, the water should be measured every 35 minutes. But you haven't said who the actor is, so I don't know if it's me or the technician or the lab assistant or the intern or Joe. Really, we have no idea who the actor is. And that's a large reason why processes fail, or directions aren't implemented, or procedures never go as planned, because it's not clear who should do what. So instead, name the actor. Okay, not only name them, but put them at the beginning. So in here, we have the technician should measure the water every 35 minutes, or we can say measure the water every 35 minutes. And there's an imperative voice here, measure, which is an implied you. So in this case, we're telling you to measure the water every 35 minutes. Okay? So, and maybe in this case, the instructions are given only to you, so it's quite clear who needs to take action. So another reason people use passive language is when they don't want to essentially blame somebody for something. So, the door was left open last night. That's an example of passive language. The door was left open. We have no idea who did that. Instead, we knowingly don't want to say the security guard left the door open last night. So just be conscious of how you use active and passive language. Sometimes we do it because we do not want to name the actor. We don't want to assign blame or assign a responsibility. And sometimes we do it because we just haven't thought it through. So my encouragement here is around thinking through whether you want to use active or passive language. And if you want to bring your writing to life, use active language. Another tool for your toolkit is specific language. And we have another course in the Academy around writing performance reviews, where we talk a lot about using specific language. And using specific language is a transferable skill. So really mastering the art of specific language will help you write everything you write with more detail, more specificity. So let's look at some examples here. The opposite of specific language is vague language. So an example might be, some time ago, the building was destroyed in a disaster. So we don't really know here what some time ago, and we don't also know what the disaster was. So if we wanted to change that to something more specific, we'd say, in 1994, instead of some time ago, fire destroyed the apartment house. Notice, interestingly, that we have shared much more information with our reader in less space. Okay? Usually that's the case, that we can convey even more specific language, more specific information in less space by getting rid of those vague words and replacing them with specific ones. So another example, our group went to Los Angeles for a meeting. We could make that more specific. Our project team flew. It wasn't went, they flew to Los Angeles to meet with Harriet Allen, the systems designer. So I can say that if I read that specific example, I learned a lot more. You flew to Los Angeles and you met with Harriet, the systems designer, instead of our group went to LA for a meeting. Okay, so use specific language. You convey a lot more information. And then here's some more examples again of vague and specific language. So we often see these, a vehicle or a car becomes a car. Wow, keep going with that. Where does a car? Car goes to a convertible. All right, another example, equipment. I need some equipment. What kind of equipment? You need a laptop. All right, I went there. How did you get there? You ran, you walked, you drove. I traveled. How did you travel? So, this may not be business relevant for the kind of writing you do, but you can see how you can apply it to your work. Instead of using vague language, use specific language. All right, so I want you to think here about plain English and how to use plain English. So we work with people all around the world in all different sectors and different kinds of industries and organizations. And this is an issue that people everywhere struggle with. Somehow we learned somewhere that if we use what we call pompous language or overinflated language, people will think that we are smarter. But really, the reality is that oftentimes those big words slow our reader down. So not to say that our readers aren't smart and that we're not smart. It just helps us move more quickly when we use plain English. My favorite example was I was listening on the radio to a couple scientists explain a disaster. I guess it was when there was a volcano erupting. I think it was in Iceland, so a few years ago. The volcano was erupting, and first they had a scientist on, and he was explaining how that eruption happened, and he was using lots of technical terms. And I wanted to change the radio station because I did not understand his technical language, although it's a public radio, so I was in fact the intended audience. But all I could think of was, I guess I don't have the background for this, and I'll never understand exactly what forces were at play geologically to force this volcano to explode. And then they had another fellow who came on after, and his job was also to explain what happened, but he used plain English words. And he explained the pressure and the forces underneath Earth that pushed up and created this volcanic explosion. And although I don't remember exactly how it happened, at the time I remember thinking, this fellow really understands what happened because he explained it using plain English. So oftentimes people use overinflated or pompous language because they either think that makes them sound smarter, or they don't really understand what's happening themselves, so they kind of adopt big words to make it sound like they do. And we're here to say that we've worked with with lots and lots of technical experts, and the truth is that using plain English will increase your authority instead of the big words. So again, why use a $20 word when a 5-cent word will suffice? Okay, so here's an example, per your request, enclosed herewith are documents concerning the above mentioned project. So lots of, words that kind of make some of us run screaming out the door. Instead, as you asked, I'm sending a description of the Acme project. Notice here how we used specific language instead of the above mentioned project. We named the project. Please read the description. Okay, the description, again specific, and send it back to me before January 15th. We'll then begin the system modifications. So if we wanted to take that even further, what's another word for modification? All right, so could be a big word, might be the right word. You could also use the word changes instead of modifications. Okay, so again, we're looking for those 5-cent words. Every organization uses and has their own jargon or made-up words. So we wrote another book called Reports, Proposals, and Procedures. In it, we talk about we have a few examples of kind of modern made-up words, and you have them in your organization, and other people understand them inside your work group for sure. The danger with jargon is what? The danger is when you use jargon outside of your organization or your work group, and other people may not understand it immediately. Okay, so words like buy-in, drill down, drink the Kool-Aid, ducks in a row, leverage as a verb. We've seen banks talk about migrating customers. You have your own. They may be even more sophisticated or technical than these. Remember, jargon is different than acronyms. Okay, so acronyms are the abbreviation for some sort of system, process, term that you use in your organization. There's only one word around acronyms, and that's to spell it out the first time. Spelling it out gives you authority or privilege, permission to use it in that document again. The first time you must spell it out. But jargon's different. Jargon are the words that you use to show yourself as an insider to your organization. And they are sanctioned as long as they're inside. But you never know where that document that you just wrote will end up, or the email that you just sent will go next. So avoid terms that could confuse your reader. They may look at them and see them as just unnecessary terms when you could have used a simple word that everyone would understand. Okay, so again, when we're working with even the most senior level people, they don't want to see jargon or insider language or too much technical language. They want to understand. So as outsiders, we often serve as the gauge for that. If we can understand it, then it is going to be understood by everyone in your organization. Okay, so don't use insider information unless you know that your audience or that person specifically is the only one that's ever going to come across that information. Okay, so you're getting closer to making sure you've already put all the components of your document together, whether it's a large report, and we have more tips on writing reports and proposals, procedures in another course here, but maybe you're putting together a memo, maybe it's some meeting notes, an email, a different form of internal or external document. You've put all the pieces together, you've thought about it. Now you've written your first draft and you're ready to go back and make sure that you've covered all the proofreading tips. Okay, so the first one is to make sure you take breaks between writing the first draft, revising it, and proofreading it. Okay, I'm making the assumption that whatever you're writing is worth it. Okay, so don't miss this opportunity to get rid of the mistakes. I shared with you all some data that we collected from our survey. Again, 85% of readers are going to form an impression of you based on the writing that you send them. And 85 of them would say that it could be a negative impression based on the magnitude of errors or careless errors that you've included. So you have a chance to catch them here with proofreading. You've caught most of them because you've done some careful planning and organizing, but now take a break between writing the first draft, revising it, and proofing it so you can come back with fresh eyes. Okay, try reading your email. Again, you can swap that word out for report, proposal, meeting notes, what have you. Read it out loud and ask yourself if the sentences sound correct when you hear them. Okay, another tip on that, if it doesn't sound right to you, stop right there and rewrite that sentence. Oftentimes when we're editing work for others, we'll simply say, this sentence needs to be rewritten because you can't just move one word around. Rethink your sentence. Awkward, right? You don't want awkward sentence. Try proofreading backwards from the closing to the salutation with the subject line last. That's another tip that professionals use to make sure that they haven't missed any errors. In a long email, remember to check the headings or the subject line, any other places where typos can be hiding. So it's easy to overlook headings because they point you forward to the topics that follow them. And that's the whole point. But you want to make sure that there are no problems in your headings, subject lines, or other places that can sometimes be hiding. Okay? Did anyone catch that one? There was an error there. So we embedded that in our slide. For those of you who are paying very careful attention, make sure that you've checked all the components of your message before sending it.